All right, we're going to discuss RNA. When you say the word RNA, RNA stands for ribonucleic acid. RNA. R is for the ribose nucleic acid. So we're going to talk about RNA structure. The first thing, when we say RNA is a nucleic acid. Another word for nucleic acid is a polynucleotide. So, to understand RNA a little better, you need to understand the building blocks. The building blocks for any nucleic acid is a nucleotide. The word nucleotide is a monomer. It is a monomer of RNA. And you need to understand what a nucleotide of RNA looks like. So, when we look at the nucleotide of RNA, it looks like the nucleotide of DNA. The first thing is you have a 5-carbon sugar. The 5-carbon sugar that is found in RNA is ribose, and that's where we get the name ribonucleic acid. You always start with your 5-carbon sugar. To the left of your 5-carbon sugar, you have a phosphate group. And to the right of your 5-carbon sugar, you're going to have nitrogen bases. Now, your nitrogen bases can vary. These are going to be adenine, uracil, guanine, and cytosine. These are going to vary. Now, when we talked about DNA, we talked about that DNA is going to be a double helix. The structure of RNA is a single stranded, and it is helical molecule. So I'm going to simplify it. When you draw a line that is RNA, it's not double-stranded, it's single-stranded. This line represents the sugar phosphate backbone. So literally your sugar, which is ribose, is going to make up the sugar phosphate backbone. And then coming off of it, it's going to have its phosphate attached to either side. We said RNA is a polynucleotide. It's got multiple nucleotides attached to it. So the black line represents the sugar phosphate backbone. It is made up of ribose and phosphates. Now, pointing in towards this side of the page would be your nitrogen bases. So you can have adenine, it can have uracil, it can have guanine, and it can be cytosine. Now, it's important to note the bonds that hold your nucleotides together. And the bonds that hold your nucleotides together, which is represented here, is called a phosphodiester bond. Phosphodiester bonds are going to hold nucleotides together. I'm going to bring this up a little bit so that you can see it. So RNA is a polynucleotide. The line is going to represent the sugar phosphate backbone. Your nitrogen bases come off, and then a phosphodiester bond is going to link your nucleotides together. Now, if we were going to talk about DNA and simplify it, not DNA, RNA, you literally could just draw a line to represent the sugar phosphate backbone and your nitrogen bases that come off the center. So that's the simplified version. So RNA is going to be a single stranded item. The nitrogen bases come off, and the bond in between is called the phosphodiester bond. Now, when we talk about RNA, there are going to be 3 types of RNA. The first RNA is called messenger RNA. Now we do shorthand these as mRNA. This is going to carry information from DNA that encodes proteins. Now, a lot of times I like to think of mRNA as the recipe, the copy of the recipe. So when we say mRNA, DNA is going to be copied into RNA. It's a copy. This is a copy of DNA. That is the easier way to think of mRNA. It's the copy of DNA that will leave the nucleus to be translated or encoded into a protein. So then your next type. The next type is called ribosomal RNA. Now, ribosomal RNA is just the RNA that makes up ribosomes. So ribosomes are made of RNA. It's what ribosomes are made out of. That one's easy. Now, the third type is called transfer RNA. Transfer RNA, shorthand is tRNA. And the job of transfer RNA is to carry amino acids to the ribosome to be translated. So transfer RNA is going to be a little bit different. Transfer RNA's job is to transfer amino acids at the ribosome. So we're going to talk about transfer RNA. I always like to draw it as an upside down J. It is going to attach to amino acids. This is the amino acid, and it literally is going to carry it, and it's going to transfer it to the ribosome. So it is also going to have nitrogen bases because it's RNA, and it looks something like that. Transfer RNA. Now we're going to go through these pretty well. You don't have to worry about anything right now except for understanding RNA and that there's 3 types of RNA. So ribosomal RNA is the easiest because ribosomal RNA actually is going to literally be the physical component that makes up your ribosome. So your ribosomes are the units inside of the cell that is responsible for protein synthesis. So RNA, mRNA, is a copy of DNA which travels to the ribosome to make proteins, and then your transfer RNA is going to transfer the amino acids to be incorporated together to build proteins.